Dawn broke serenely over a post-apocalyptic metropolis. Sunlight crested the towering barricade. A haze of exhaust and mist cloaked the cityscape. At first glance, everything appeared unremarkable, mundane, but a closer inspection revealed a colossal rampart encircling the city, resembling a fortress from a bygone era. Tranquility reigned, with no indication of impending danger. Yet, what secrets did the inhabitants conceal? What threats lay beyond the walls? Our protagonist sought out Tony's barbershop. His unruly locks needed taming. The barber expertly wielded his shears, nearing the completion of the trim. A television hummed in the background, broadcasting the news. The anchor reported that interdepartmental analysis suggested a potential maritime incursion by hostile forces. Citizens were urged to remain calm. The government had dispatched specialized operatives, ensuring the populace's protection. Tony declared the government was disseminating falsehoods in the news. If the territory was genuinely secure, why would affluent individuals construct aerial metropolises for self-preservation? The protagonist affirmed Tony's accuracy. However, the barber cautioned him against moving his head. Any movement risked an undesirable removal. The hero remained silent, absorbed in contemplation. He pondered that the government's forewarnings of impending threats, about the approaching calamities, constituted their greatest act of benevolence. The privileged, the influential elite of society had established exclusive, airborne cities that floated high above. There they remained protected, despite the turmoil unfolding below. Then, he abruptly proclaimed that even this sanctuary would soon meet its end. His utterance bewildered the barber, who was clueless about the subject matter. He even ceased cutting his hair. The tonsorial artist, Tony, requested he cease such jesting. He expressed hope that with the hunters and their prowess, such incidents would never transpire. On a personal note, he'd never encountered a terror and inquired about their appearance. Our protagonist glanced at him sideways, responding with a light-hearted chuckle, stating they resembled the most dreadful of beasts. Amidst their conversation, in the background, a governmental public service announcement played on the television, detailing funeral arrangements should demise occur due to terrors. A 60% price reduction was offered. Tony, unfazed, continued trimming our hero's hair, pondering if he'd ever encounter these terrors. His words had barely left his lips when his head, and with it, the entire edifice, was bisected by a slender, precise incision. His head instantly cleaved in two, drenching the surroundings in gore. Yet, our protagonist remained motionless in his seat. Utter pandemonium engulfed the city. Structures crumbled under the force of devastating blows. These lacerations, it became evident, weren't inflicted by ordinary blades, nor were they the result of conventional weaponry. Gigantic shears, wielded by grotesque hands, were the source of the destruction. A monstrous being, with scissor-like appendages replacing its arms, legs, and other extremities, was responsible. This creature now stood over Tony's lifeless body, emitting a repulsive laughter. Its laughter was truly abhorrent. The monster licked its blood-soaked blades and, with unsettling irony, offered an apology for the accidental injury. Leaning over the deceased, she inquired, "Don't you recognize me? You were the one who dismissed me." She questioned his memory, but her interest in conversing with the corpse quickly waned. Her focus shifted to the remaining customer. He remained seated, frozen in place. And then she, with a surge of exhilaration, declared another plaything had presented itself. Approaching him with a menacing grin, she inquired if he harbored any fear towards her, or perhaps if he desired to become her next practice subject. His expression suddenly morphed into a mask of fury as he bellowed, "My hair!" Rage consumed him. Tony had severed his excess locks in a moment of carelessness. The creature was taken aback by this outburst. She was astonished by his sudden preoccupation with such a trivial matter. She vowed to rectify the situation immediately. This time, she assured him, she would exercise greater care with his delicate flesh. She commenced closing her shears, prepared to sever his head as well. Action was imperative. He had to avert a fate similar to Tony's. He cried out Tong's name, summoning his aid. She materialized instantly, questioning how frequently she must reiterate the prohibition against such informal address. His arm was swiftly engulfed by grotesque, organic tendrils. Upon this unsettling growth, an eye manifested. In a flash, he evaded the descending shears and unsheathed a katana from the appendage on his arm. Tong vehemently demanded to be addressed as a slasher, and with justification. For the katana, one of Tong's inherent abilities, simultaneously cleave through absolutely everything. Our protagonist instantly utilized it, dicing the creature, alongside his menacing shears. The beast was astonished. Its lacerations pulsed with black and crimson electrical discharges. Our hero disregarded her, donning his hood to shield himself from the gore, and prepared for departure. In the ensuing moment, the monster erupted in a geyser of blood. It met its demise. Our hero began removing his hood, uttering, "Apologies. I intentionally lacerated your flesh." But for such pitiful conduct, he was promptly struck by Tong, who scolded him for his melodramatic tone. She then smugly inquired. She'd reminded him countless times to address her as Mrs. Slasher. Yet, the protagonist failed to heed her warnings. He persisted in irritating her with his casual remarks. "Well, Tong," he'd say. "No problem, Tong." Such impudence ignited Tong's helmet with fury. She challenged him, inquiring if he desired a brawl. Our central figure was known as Li Fan. He held the position of a D-rank terror hunter. At present, he was observing his disheveled hair in the mirror's reflection. Tong mocked him with laughter, remarking, "What a dreadful hairstyle. It surprisingly suits you." These so-called terror hunters constituted a force dedicated to combating terrors. The government assigned their ranks based on individual prowess. However, our protagonist differed from his peers. Besides his occupation, he also hailed from a different dimension. Tong hastened to absorb the terror's essence swiftly. Without delay, he plunged his katana into the vanquished terror, and the creature's energy instantly commenced flowing into him. This was another distinct attribute, a characteristic of his modern world origins, now inhabiting a realm of monstrous adversaries. Naturally, he possessed a unique mechanism, a system where vanquished foes empowered Tong, much to his delight. Upon absorbing the monstrous essence, Tong could enhance and refine his arsenal, tailoring it to his specific requirements and preferences. However, this particular foe was feeble, offering negligible spoils. As Tong assimilated the remaining energy, our protagonist gazed pensively at a floating metropolis. He contemplated his divergence from other travelers, those who hunted monsters solely for dominance, renown, and wealth. He harbored a different ambition, a purpose pursued relentlessly for 5 years. His sole desire was to fulfill his assignment, to conclude his duties and resume his tranquil existence back home. He yearned for his loved ones, his parents, and particularly his younger sibling. She had been abducted before his very eyes 5 years prior. He was powerless then. Now he was resolute in his quest to locate his little sister, Yahello. Tong's interruption disrupted his reverie. She wearily indicated that he was draining the creature's remaining life force. He should have ceased long ago. Li's only response was a pained ouch. He extracted his katana and the desiccated remains, inquiring of Tong, "How many foes must I vanquish to return home?" Tong accessed the information display to ascertain the answer. It revealed he had eliminated 9,995 adversaries. A mere 5 remained to accomplish the primary objective. Li pensively echoed, "The final 5. He was on the cusp of completion, and he could finally escape this forsaken realm. Directly before him, as if on command, 5 monstrous beings materialized, leaving destruction in their wake. They advanced toward him relentlessly. These were the infamous creatures widely reported in the news. A noise from behind caught the hero's attention. Another urgent bulletin flashed across the already damaged television screen. The terrors, initially headed toward City C, suddenly diverted their course toward City A. All citizens of City A were instructed to seek refuge. They were urged to proceed to designated shelters immediately. But before confronting the monstrous entities, our hero had a pressing matter to attend to. Using debris from a building, he constructed a makeshift tomb for the barber. He inscribed upon it, "Here lies poor Barber Tony." After paying his final respects for the barber's loyal service, he prepared to confront the terrors head-on. Li Fan entered the impending battle with unprecedented enthusiasm. These were the final adversaries, and he yearned for the comfort of home. The anticipated moment had finally arrived, or so he believed. But before our protagonist could reach his destination, pandemonium erupted in the heart of the metropolis. Terrified inhabitants desperately sought refuge, their cries echoing the arrival of the monstrous entity. They pleaded for their lives, desperate to avoid obliteration. A few managed to flee, while others fell prey to the creature's merciless grasp. To this behemoth, humans were mere insignificant pests. The monster unleashed its devastating power, wreaking havoc upon them. Even those who had seemingly reached safety succumbed to the creature's relentless onslaught. A handful of fortunate souls found refuge amidst the debris, concealed from the monster's sight. Yet, even they sensed their impending doom. This time, their demise was inevitable. Their time had come, for even their protectors, the city's valiant guardians, one Filu, known as Feet Without a Shadow, and Tom, known as Catman, were vanquished. Now everyday citizens face impossible odds. Imminent devastation threatens to raze their city. Yet, amidst the despair, a survivor offered a glimmer of hope. Prior to the onslaught, 3 hunters arrived in their town. Among them, a legendary figure, a rising star of immense power. He was already nearing the combat zone. Enveloped in crackling yellow lightning, he descended upon the battlefield, interposing himself between the attackers and the fleeing populace. A vortex of dust and electrical energy erupted. The hero, exhilarated by the impending clash, exuded an aura of unwavering confidence. "Seems I haven't arrived a moment too soon," he declared. "They don't call me Lightning Wong Live for nothing." He flamboyantly tallied his adversaries on his fingers, 5 in total. "Today," he proclaimed with a triumphant grin, "my rank shall undoubtedly ascend after I vanquish them all." His celebration was short-lived, because a shadow instantly enveloped him. It was the silhouette of a monstrous foot belonging to one of the terrors. It was poised to crush this impudent insect underfoot. With a deathly roar, he unleashed his full might upon the hero's previous location. The attack sent debris flying in every direction. But once the dust settled, the terror was astonished to discover an empty space. He couldn't comprehend where his quarry had vanished. The hero was already positioned behind him, mocking the monster's sluggishness. The hero readied a counteroffensive. His form crackled with electric energy. He charged his lightning strike, launching himself towards the foe. With lightning speed, in a heartbeat, his attack landed squarely on the terror. The battlefield was engulfed in a thick haze of smoke and dust. Visibility was reduced to 0. Even without witnessing the impact's aftermath, the remaining inhabitants erupted in joyous cheers. They believed they were delivered. A savior had vanquished the initial menace. Among those concealed within the debris, a man retrieved a book from his satchel. He proclaimed to the others that this champion was the renowned, ascendant luminary of the regime. He expressed elation at acquiring his book pre-fame. At a bargain price, he mused on his own shrewdness. The tome was titled Terror Hunter. It was the 7th installment in the Terror Hunter series, published by the Hunters Association. It cataloged all C-rank hunters, encompassing those wielding lightning. Like Wang Lei, originally priced at $2,998, he offered it for $5,000. The others suggested he cease his profiteering, particularly under the present circumstances. Suddenly, dread consumed his gaze. Upon witnessing the book vendor from moments prior, impaled upon multiple appendages, another horror had located their sanctuary, obliterating the remnants of the cadaver. With the declaration, "Perish, human," the survivors frantically fled, distancing themselves from the deceased's remains. The creature retrieved a tome and perused it intently. He pondered the subject matter of the book. Was it about hunters? Did it detail a novel method of fabricated victory, concocted by lesser beings seeking a semblance of security? The other beast, previously struck by the hero, emerged from the debris. He was relatively unscathed, and enraged by the insect's audacity to resist. Such impudence infuriated the hero, prompting him to inquire, how dare they disgrace humanity in his presence? This transgression was unpardonable. He commenced amassing electrical discharges around himself, even utilizing them to ricochet off the terrain. Subsequently, he ascended skyward, focusing all his energy into his right hand. He prepared for a final blow. An azure sphere of electricity enveloped his fist. He charged towards the creatures, wielding the potent energy. The impact was formidable, Yet, to his astonishment, the outcome was not as anticipated. Furthermore, the beast remained unscathed, despite channeling all his strength into the thunderbolt. As he focused on assaulting one creature, another monstrosity emerged from behind, poised to strike. The creature, resembling a mutated octopus with crab-like appendages, unleashed a cerulean energy beam from its maw. Not even a swift hero, such as Huang Lei, could evade the sudden onslaught. He barely parried the blow. However, it proved futile. The full force of the attack struck him. He was propelled backward, ricocheting off the rocks for dozens of meters. The horrors seized this chance to assail him. They converged upon him en masse, attempting to ensnare him with their tentacles. One Lei barely evaded a relentless barrage of tentacles. Each appendage narrowly missed its mark. He was forced to deflect several of the assaults. The protagonist pondered whether these creatures were kin, or why they all possessed crimson tentacles. Yet amidst the chaos, he observed one monstrosity standing apart. A strategy formed in his mind. A cunning smile crept across his face, admiring his own ingenuity. Overwhelmed by their sheer numbers, he deduced eliminating the weaker adversaries first would be advantageous. A thunderous blast repelled the tentacled onslaught. He reacted swiftly, vanishing from his previous location in a flash. The four horrors gazed at the lingering electrical discharge. While the terrors remained bewildered, the hero charged towards the isolated monster. His intent was to prioritize its destruction. However, the multi-limbed, mummy-like creature proved to be more formidable than anticipated. Once the hero was within his grasp, a multitude of hands and bindings surged towards him. He was given no opportunity to react, as countless restraints swiftly ensnared him, immobilizing him completely. He believed the monstrous being wouldn't be able to contain him. With mere pathetic wrappings, he smirked as he started to summon electrical energy, but his efforts proved insufficient. Even exerting his maximum power couldn't liberate him. The hero gazed at the bindings with a bewildered expression, utterly astonished. He was incredulous that they could neutralize all his electrical power. How did this creature possess such a remarkable capability? Meanwhile, the terrifying entity started to gradually drag the captive hero closer, preparing to deliver the final blow. Wan Lei, sensing his impending doom, fought back with every ounce of strength he had left. His attempts were futile. The bindings were absorbing not just his electrical currents, but his physical strength as well. The other monstrous entities were rapidly converging upon him. He sensed his demise was imminent. It appeared that his rescue was beyond possibility. He muttered in despair, "I never imagined my heroic journey would terminate before it commenced." His final moments arrived today. He was ultimately unable to deliver anyone. The remaining individuals fled in sheer terror. They witnessed even the legendary Wang Lei succumb to the overwhelming might of these creatures. Meanwhile, our protagonist was in remarkably high spirits. He appeared to be thoroughly enjoying himself. He serenely navigated his scooter, content that his spoils remained untouched. Tong observed that had they not paused at each traffic signal, their arrival would have been significantly expedited. Regardless of their pace, they eventually reached the scene of conflict. Beholding the assembled horde of terrors, Tong offered a smug grin. He relished the sight of their collective presence, and she anticipated they would be quite delectable. Observing that some lunatic had arrived, completely oblivious to the situation, Wang Lei yelled, "Fool, flee immediately, or you'll perish." Before he could utter a word, a grotesque creature's tentacles lunged toward the imbecile. One of the behemoths rapidly closed in on Li Fan. It anticipated no opposition whatsoever. Hoping for a swift meal, our protagonist was ready. He assured Wang Lei that she could relax. His arm had already commenced its metamorphosis. The beast, moments ago anticipating an easy feast, gazed in terror at the colossal hand approaching. Evasion was impossible. The hand seized it by its hideous eye. It was crushed with immense force, flattened like a pastry. Li Fan boasted. It was actually quite formidable, and it was already a formidable level 9,996 creature. The power he employed to vanquish the beast was known as augmented might. The other horrors and the fellow hero gazed at him in astonishment. Their eyes conveyed disbelief. They were baffled by his immense power. Could he truly be an S-rank hunter? If so, why was he completely unknown? One of the monsters inquired about our protagonist's identity. He glanced at a text he'd confiscated from a local. Our hero declared himself a monster slayer and introduced himself as Li Fun. After utilizing the ability, his arm reverted to its normal state. The creature thoughtfully began to peruse the book. He searched for the name, but found nothing. Observing his bewilderment, Li suggested the name might be absent, because he was merely a D-rank night watchman. The book likely only listed C-rank hunters and higher. This revelation offended the other hero. They wondered, when did D-ranks become so formidable? The creatures exhaled, a collective sigh of relief washing over them. Assuming he was a typical D-rank weakling, they anticipated an easy disposal. Suddenly, a flurry of tentacles lunged towards our protagonist. Motionless, he simply inquired if Tong was prepared. She countered with a question of her own. What technique was he planning to employ? His favorite skill? Slash. A massive, unusually shaped blade materialized in his grasp. With a single stroke, he cleaved through the incoming tentacles. But this was merely the opening salvo. Immediately following, a three-eyed monstrosity scowled, readying its next assault. It inhaled deeply, its massive jaws agape. An energy beam was coalescing. Li Fun braced himself, hands planted firmly on the earth. He prepared to conjure a protective shield. As the beast unleashed its fully charged blast, a crimson, energy-infused stone barrier materialized before Li. A cerulean energy beam instantly shot into it. The impact fractured the wall, yet it remained resilient. Li swiftly prepared a counterattack. He channeled his energy for a sudden burst of speed. The moment the assault ceased, he reacted with lightning-fast reflexes, striking from the opposite flank. A katana was already gripped in his hand. He vaulted over the creature. He focused his power for a decisive blow. He executed the strike, adding another kill to his tally. A mere trio remained. Witnessing their comrade's demise, the remaining horrors were terrified by the mere presence of their adversary. Li pressed his advantage, denying them any chance to recover or strategize. He charged towards them instantly. He urged them to join their fallen brethren. He targeted the ebony octopus first, but without warning, the beast's protective shell deflected his seemingly lethal strike. The blade failed to pierce its hide. Li gazed at his weapon and the creature in disbelief. Gaze. The second creature had already begun to deride him. It mocked his blade, calling it pathetic, claiming it couldn't penetrate their armor. Such insults enraged Tong. She was infuriated by the pitiful sword label. She vowed never to transform into a blade again. Instead, she morphed into a colossal mallet, which Li intended to utilize instantly. The hammer pulverized two monsters simultaneously, but it didn't merely crush them. It obliterated them, with such power that a dust cloud erupted from the debris. Li was displeased that he had, yet again, soiled his attire with the grime. Not just him, but the entire vicinity was affected. But Tong retorted that it was his own doing. Wan Lei was astonished and questioned how such a feat was achievable. He inquired if hunters weren't limited to a single skill. How was Li capable of wielding so many different abilities? Li feigned contemplation, pondering the inquiry. He then responded with a conceited air. His answer was simple. He had assimilated the abilities of every vanquished foe. Meanwhile, Tong was already partaking in the feast. He savored each delectable morsel. Wang Lei found the situation utterly unbelievable. It was highly irregular, even for this extraordinary realm. Li Fun prepared to eliminate the final terror. The Tong he held morphed into a katana. Our protagonist brandished the katana, aiming it directly at the creature. "You're the last one," he declared. But Wang Lei intervened, urging him to pause. He cautioned him to proceed with vigilance. This terror was unlike the others. It had inexplicably consumed the power of its brethren. Upon hearing this, Li turned towards Tong. He remarked, "Absorbing another's power is akin to your own ability." But she refused to acknowledge the resemblance, taking offense. Her power, she declared, was vastly superior to those pathetic creatures. Nevertheless, a sense of familiarity with this beast lingered within her. The exact nature of this recognition remained elusive for the moment. Li exuded an aura of unwavering confidence in his impending triumph. The beast's power, he proclaimed, was inconsequential to him. Eliminating it meant a return to his former existence. To achieve this, he was willing to go to any lengths. Our protagonist fearlessly lunged directly towards the creature. "Begone to the abyss," he roared. Terror unleashed a torrent of bandages in his direction. Its aim was to ensnare him. Tong cautioned Li to exercise vigilance, but Li had anticipated such a maneuver. With a display of swift dexterity, he sliced the bandages into ribbons. Such flimsy restraints were no match for someone of his caliber. Li deduced that victory hinged on a single factor. He simply needed to evade the bandages, rendering the monster utterly powerless against him. But there was a purpose behind Terror's absorption of Wan's abilities. Now, he could wield that power himself. His lightning bolt narrowly missed our protagonist. It left a deep gash across his cheek. Li was astonished, completely caught off guard by the assault. Tong reminded him of his recent brush with death. Li was acutely aware of this fact. He excused himself, attributing it to a momentary lapse in judgment. Wan Lei was even more stunned. This was his first encounter with a terror, capable of not just absorbing another's power, but also utilizing it. Li knew he had to accelerate his pace. Tong had equipped him with jet boots for this very purpose. Li activated them instantly, launching forward with rocket-like speed. Terror unleashed the stolen lightning technique once more. But Li's velocity was remarkable. He surpassed the speed of the lightning bolts. When a barrage of lightning struck his previous location, he was already soaring towards his objective. The creature seemed unable to react, its destiny sealed. Li didn't waver for an instant. He prepared to conclude the battle immediately. One swift slash of his katana would be enough, but to his astonishment, his blade halted mere inches from its mark. The monster hadn't just blocked his katana by seizing his arms, it had also ensnared both his legs. It now held our protagonist in an unyielding grasp, and it didn't just restrain him, it instantly started draining his energy. Within seconds, his boots began to diminish in potency. Tong alerted Li that his boots' reactive energy had been consumed. He responded with alarm, confirming he witnessed it firsthand. The creature was poised to utilize its newfound power immediately. It materialized identical jet engines on its hand, mirroring those on our hero's boots. It intended to crush the hapless hero with them. The blow struck the armor our hero had conjured for protection. The monster instantly began absorbing this capability as well. Tong urged Li to hasten. This skill would soon be assimilated as well. Simultaneously, the creature was siphoning his energy. It also exerted downward pressure with its reactive limb. Li could barely maintain his grip. His arms strained, bulging until his clothing ripped. His garments were shredded by the force. He narrowly escaped from beneath its defenses. The monster's hand slammed down, sealing the exit. A resounding crash echoed. Li was compelled to acknowledge. This behemoth was more formidable than anticipated. Tong, with a triumphant sneer, declared returning home would be significantly more challenging. Perhaps a strategic withdrawal was necessary. Wan Lei concurred. The creature's power seemed insurmountable. He recommended awaiting the S-rank hunter's arrival. Together, they could vanquish the monstrous entity. But Li remained resolute. He refused to surrender his passage home. He strategized on overcoming the formidable creature. The beast had conjured a protective carapace. It had assimilated yet another power. The terror reinforced its shell with multiple appendages. It advanced upon our protagonist with deliberate slowness. A confident grin spread across Li's countenance. He seemed to have devised a countermeasure. While the terror could absorb adversaries' capabilities, it apparently lacked human-level intellect. Employing the assimilated skill, the terror manifested armored gauntlets on its extremities. These were specifically designed to amplify its blows. Li observed another intriguing detail. The creature couldn't retain an ability for an extended period. It had to utilize them immediately after absorption. Armed with this knowledge, he stood resolutely against the impending assault. He knew the monster's swiftness was no longer a threat. Wan Lei cautioned him to exercise prudence. Indeed, the creature's former velocity had vanished. Li effortlessly evaded the assault. He was poised to capitalize on his adversary's vulnerability. He was ready to subdue him. Li employed his other capabilities. Numerous thorny vines ensnared the monstrous being and all its appendages. The creature instantly began absorbing that ability as well. However, it couldn't complete the process. Many massive, thick vines entangled it. Li recognized his opportunity had arrived. With Tong's assistance, he again materialized his katana. It now blazed with fire. The flames on the katana intensified. Utilizing his jet boot once more, he targeted his objective. This time, the monster was completely restrained. Its hands were also bound. Escape from our protagonist was impossible. He unleashed a devastating, fiery strike. Whatever remained after the cut was consumed by flames. He left behind what he presumed to be the monster's remains. He glanced at the information display, a burning sensation in his chest. The mission's advancement was at a standstill. He was a mere half a point from completion. Lee was outraged. What in the world? What sort of ludicrous prank is this? Even Tong was perplexed. He speculated that perhaps the terror was still alive. He gazed distrustfully at the monster's smoldering remnants. What he witnessed there stunned him. He was in disbelief. Amidst the terror's fiery debris, a figure emerged, enveloped in flames and smoke. Lee found it impossible to accept. It was his sister, Yike. Her appearance was slightly altered, but he couldn't be mistaken. It was undoubtedly her. She appeared to have been confined within the terror. How was this possible? Where did she originate in this realm? He urgently called out to Tong for action. Numerous ice shards materialized around his hand and floated midair. After yelling "freeze," he instantly hurled them toward the young woman. Upon contact, the ice rapidly began to chill, the intense heat and flames engulfing the casket. Yike lay amidst the scattered wreckage. Cautiously nearing the spot he started to shed his outer garment. He then settled beside the girl and draped it over her. He pondered his sister's presence there. Upon hearing his inquiry, Tong apathetically questioned how she knew about the situation. Gesturing towards the girl he now cradled, she asked Li Fan if he was certain of her identity as his sister. Gazing at the girl's face, who slumbered serenely in his embrace, the protagonist was at a loss for words. Madame Cutter remarked that she appeared to be born from the very essence of dread. This observation brought little comfort to Li Fan, who clung to the hope that it was indeed his sister. However, due to his extensive knowledge, a disturbing thought crossed his mind. It could be a ruse. The image of Yike, abducted by a stranger. Her pleas for rescue amidst tears suddenly flashed into the hero's consciousness. After evaluating the evidence, Li Fan deduced it couldn't possibly be his sibling. She was incapable of becoming a monster. Resolve hardened his gaze in an instant. He sprang to his feet, unsheathing his blade. Li Fan cautioned himself against falling for the trickery. It was almost certainly an illusion. Sword drawn, he observed the girl prostrate on the earth. The protagonist addressed her with a derogatory term and offered an apology. He then positioned his weapon against her serene, sleeping countenance. But in a fleeting moment, her eyes fluttered open. Li Fan was astonished by this unexpected development. He instantly inquired why she had awakened. The girl's gaze fixed on the sword before her, confusion evident in her eyes. But a split second later, upon seeing the man wielding the weapon, her expression transformed into one of pure fury. Li Fan gazed at her, utterly perplexed, unable to comprehend the abrupt shift in her demeanor. In the following instant, the young woman rose and clung to his chest, sobbing softly. The protagonist was baffled by her actions. Nevertheless, he refused to be deceived. Seizing her by the head, he forcibly propelled her away. Shoving her back, he icily commanded her to keep her distance. He added that her tricks wouldn't work on him. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. The girl stared in astonishment at the blade directed at her. With a swift motion, the protagonist sliced through her cloak with the sword, partially revealing her form. However, the girl abruptly lunged towards the weapon. Crimson flowed from the lacerated flesh. Li Fan anticipated being her executioner, but her deliberate impalement on the blade stunned him. However, the young woman didn't stop there, and in a flash, she embraced the blade, driving it deeper into herself. Crimson stained both the gash and her lips, her amethyst eyes shimmering. The girl fixed a sorrowful gaze upon the protagonist. Abruptly, she lifted a trembling hand, caressing his cheek and bestowing upon Li Fan a gentle smile. Her voice, a husky whisper, uttered, "Brother." The main character's eyes widened. Astonishment and disbelief etched upon his face. But in the ensuing instant, her eyelids fluttered closed as she collapsed. Li Fan caught her, swiftly extracting the sword. Regaining his composure, he cried out, urging her to fight for her life, to resist the encroaching darkness. Tom, hovering nearby, declared her demise preferable, allowing him to return to his own realm, then added she was nothing more than a menace. Upon hearing this, Li Fan clenched his jaw. He recognized he was now driven solely by his emotions. Grasping the girl's shoulder, he intended to pull her away. But suddenly, he witnessed the scene. She gazed at him, a tender smile gracing her lips, and called him brother. If there were even the slightest possibility, it was genuine. Then in a split second, the protagonist, without even turning, bellowed from Mrs. Cutter. He urged her to employ rapid healing. The moment his hand touched the girl's injury, a vibrant green, healing luminescence emanated from her. Mere moments later, the girl's wound vanished almost instantaneously. Observing this, Tong couldn't help but react. But Riley inquired of his mentor if he longed to revisit his birthplace. He persisted in his healing efforts and responded that eliminating someone bearing his sister's visage was unbearable. Therefore, dispatching a different threat would be less difficult. This would allow him to fulfill his objective. He gently placed his arm around the girl's shoulders. He then carefully lifted her into his arms. He remarked on her uncanny resemblance to his sibling. This could present a chance to forge a connection and potentially uncover the hidden reality. A voice abruptly echoed from behind the departing hero. It commanded him to halt. The speaker was the same blonde individual Li Fan had rescued from demise. Placing a hand on his chest, he introduced himself as Wan Lei. He declared his recent elevation to the rank of Sarang. He then proclaimed loudly, expressing profound admiration for Li Fan's displayed prowess. Following a respectful bow, he humbly inquired if Li Fan would accept him as an apprentice. This unexpected development astonished everyone present. However, the protagonist promptly declined. Wan Lei drew nearer. With a nervous chuckle and a scratch to the back of his head, he inquired why he was being refused as a student. Li Fan responded that it was too much trouble. He added that he would soon depart from this world regardless. Upon receiving this answer, the young man let out another uneasy laugh. He proceeded on his path. The protagonist, exasperated, questioned Wan Lei, who was trailing behind him, about the reason for his pursuit. He reminded him of his previous explanation, that he was not taking on any pupils. He rubbed the nape of his neck and stated that his residence was also in that direction. Having ascended the staircase, he found himself on a level with two adjacent dwellings. Wan Lei enthusiastically gestured towards them and addressed Li Fan as master. He insisted that he was being completely truthful. The latter retorted in annoyance that he should refrain from using that title. Upon entering his flat, the protagonist attempted to shut the door using his foot. However, he was unsuccessful in his attempt. Wan Lei, trailing close behind, commenced pounding on the entrance. He addressed him as master, pleading for entry, eager to acquire his skills and enhance his own prowess. His endeavors proved futile. As the portal abruptly slammed shut before him, the force propelled him backward. Li Fan's exasperated voice then commanded him to leave. As the protagonist delicately positioned the girl on the settee, Wan Lei's persistent wails emanated from beyond the barrier, imploring him to reconsider. Addressing Li Fan, Tong denounced his callousness, adding with a grin that the young man's earnestness was undeniable. He retorted, declaring his reluctance to engage with anyone from this realm. Rising from his kneeling position and observing the girl, reclining on the divan, who bore a striking resemblance to his sibling, the main character pensively speculated that he might discern the source of this dread. He glanced down at his attire in the ground. Both were soiled and stained with blood. He pivoted and exited the chamber. His intention was to cleanse himself. Tong posed a suggestive question. She inquired about his course of action if the girl awakened during his bath. The protagonist contemplated the possibility. He hadn't previously considered such a circumstance. He lifted his hand, which radiated a rosy luminescence. Using a pink, elastic substance emanating from his hand, he bound the girl. It had a rubbery texture. Deeming this sufficient, he proceeded towards the lavatory. Unbeknownst to him, the girl had already regained consciousness. In the ensuing moment, her eyes flew open. After disrobing, Li Fan entered the water-filled tub. Having settled into a comfortable posture, he expressed his contentment with a blissful sigh. He declared the bath a welcome respite after a trying day. He glanced at Tong, who swam laps with a solemn expression etched on her face. He inquired about her fate if he were to return to his own realm. She rolled onto her back, propelling herself backward with effortless strokes. In that scenario, she responded, I need to locate a new vessel. Upon hearing this, he questioned their host selection process. He also wondered about the system's own benefits in this arrangement. She lounged against the tub's edge, an air of apathy about her. Would you believe me, she asked, if I said I was utterly bored? Li Fan averted his gaze. It's all right if you prefer not to discuss it, he conceded. A sudden bang shattered the silence. The protagonist instinctively whirled towards the entrance. A shadowy figure was barely visible through the frosted glass. This was the source of the commotion. With a thunderous crash, the door burst open. Standing in the doorway was the girl, who moments before had likely been resting on the couch. She stared at the shattered door. Li Fan roared in anger, demanding an explanation for the broken door. Tong continued to swim serenely and informed him that the door was the least of his concerns. He testily conceded her point, since he had already resolved that particular issue. The girl, as if clarifying her escape, entered the room and raised a single finger. Li Fan, exasperated, questioned how he was supposed to decipher her meaning, simply by observing her expression. A moment later, the girl strode purposefully toward the bathroom. The protagonist cautiously lifted herself, grumbling that terror couldn't be relied upon. Upon reaching her destination, she abruptly flung off her cloak. In the following instant, with a nonchalant air, she spat into the tub, leaving Li Fan utterly dumbfounded, observing the girl serenely and contentedly nestled against him. He inquired if Tong was attempting to ensnare him with her allure. Tong offered a cunning smile, suggesting she might be experiencing imprinting. She elaborated that it was a psychological occurrence, where newborns identify the first being they see as their maternal figure, developing a subconscious reliance on them. She then playfully congratulated him on his newfound parenthood. These remarks jolted the protagonist back to reality. He abruptly dismissed the girl, warning her against misconstruing her identity as she remained a menace. However, upon observing her again, he couldn't deny her undeniable beauty and apparent innocence. She was genuinely captivating and seemed guileless, causing his face to flush crimson. Impulsively, he seized the startled girl's head. He then forcibly submerged her head in the water. Her eyes widened in astonishment, caught completely off guard. Percevant le fanez blush, Tong questioned why he hadn't yet disposed of her. He averted his gaze in response and suggested preserving the status quo. Releasing the girl's head, the main character gestured towards her and inquired about her name. The girl paused, as if recalling the significance. After a brief hesitation, she responded with a joyful expression, revealing her name as Alice. Interrupting their cheerful mood, Tong questioned their remaining time there. He noted the water's decreasing temperature. Li Fan, still flushed, either from the heat or shyness, indicated they'd be staying a bit longer. The whirring of the hairdryer filled the room as Li Fan dried the girl's hair. Having completed the task, he declared, in an opportune moment to discuss her resemblance to his sibling. "Is Alice your sister?" she inquired. She observed the protagonist setting down the hairdryer. He addressed Tong, remarking that she didn't appear particularly intelligent. Madame Cutter responded that acquiring the desired information from her was likely impossible. They wouldn't succeed in extracting what they needed. He opened the wardrobe containing his garments. Li Fan retrieved some attire and tossed it to the young lady. He suggested she wear them temporarily. Ignoring him completely, the girl promptly began changing her clothes. This prompted him to avert his gaze and instruct her against undressing in his presence. After changing and standing on the ground, the girl examined her clothing and addressed him. Her adorable and charming visage, coupled with her graceful physique, proved so captivating that the protagonist was utterly mesmerized. Regaining his composure, he gently grasped her shoulder and promised to purchase her new attire the following day. In the ensuing moment, a resounding growl emanated directly from Alice's stomach, reverberating throughout the chamber. Bewildered, she instinctively placed her hands upon her abdomen. Observing this, Chief Fan declared it the opportune moment for a meal. Upon entering the culinary space, he accessed the refrigerator, which was replete with a diverse array of provisions. Having gathered the necessary ingredients, he commenced preparing the meal. His deft movements and remarkable speed betrayed his culinary expertise. Moments later, before a ravenous Alice, whose saliva pooled at the edge of the table, a plethora of meals materialized, each appearing as delectable as his grandmother's culinary creations. Observing her meticulous handling of the rice, Li Fan mused with a gentle grin, noting her striking resemblance to Yi Ke. Yet in a fleeting moment, vexation contorted his features. He admonished the girl devouring the rice, attempting to ingest the bowl itself, forbidding such behavior. Later, observing the vacant dishes post-meal, he inquired of Alice, seated opposite him, questioning her lack of basic sense. Gesturing towards the empty bowl, she responded with a melancholic tone, confessing her lingering hunger. Upon hearing this, our protagonist promptly accessed the refrigerator, only to be met with its barren interior. Wearing a look of annoyance, he pondered when she devoured his purchased provisions. Venturing out was no longer feasible, for at this hour, no establishment was open. Meanwhile, a burly, perspiration-soaked man pumped iron with his powerful arms. A rap at the door disrupted his vigorous activity. Startled, he turned his head. Upon opening the door, he discovered the individual whose tutelage he desired. A young woman was concealed behind him. Addressing the protagonist, he inquired, astonished, if he'd come to accept him as a pupil. To this, he maintained his composure and clarified he hadn't summoned him. Gesturing towards Alice, he asked if she had any sustenance. He explained the young lady possessed a ravenous appetite. After piling the table with an array of canned goods and treats, Wanlei declared his mentor and his mother were welcome to anything. Wanlei retorted testily that she was not his mother. Alice's eyes gleamed at the sight of the provisions. Left alone with the meal before her, she gazed at it for a brief moment. However, every morsel of food had vanished without a trace. The feast had disappeared into the girl's insatiable appetite. She nibbled on lingering remnants clinging to her lips. The sight stunned both men. They never anticipated such a rapid depletion of the provisions. In the following instant, Wanlei, astonished, inquired how she devoured it all at once. Meanwhile, the protagonist clenched his fist in frustration, declaring the feat impossible, even with the packaging. With the container, he affectionately tousled the girl's hair and playfully questioned how she maintained such a slender physique with her voracious appetite. Upon overhearing this, Tong retorted enviously that the system remained far more aesthetically pleasing. Moments later, placing a hand on his growling stomach, Li Fan confessed that attending to Alice's hunger had caused him to neglect his own. At this remark, Wanlei grinned, assuring them he knew the perfect dining spot. Even at this late hour, he affirmed. Moments later, their group reached a brick structure. Two figures stood post near the building's entrance. Wanlei greeted one of the men. The man was an associate of his. The blonde individual inquired with a smile if he was still on duty. He responded that the establishment was incredibly boisterous. Maintaining order required a formidable presence like his own. He unlatched the door, granting them entry. Our hero descended the steps behind Wanlei. The protagonist remarked that the place seemed far from a typical grocery. Addressed as master, he cautioned against judging the place by its facade. Appearances could be deceiving. Approaching and opening a door, he declared he was delighted to welcome them to the city's subterranean paradise. Li Fan and the girl gaped in astonishment at the sight before them. A cavernous chamber teemed with youngsters, grooving and swaying to booming tunes. The scene unfolded before their very eyes. Trailing the crimson-haired individual, our hero inquired if this locale had always existed. Indeed, he responded, this establishment is overseen by a formidable figure, a prominent member of the hunter fraternity. Upon hearing this, he instantly questioned, why didn't this individual intervene when terrorists besieged the city? Wanlei clarified, the unified government dispatched them to this metropolis as part of their official duties. Therefore, even if fellow hunters were present, assistance was solely at their discretion. Grasping this, our protagonist deduced the hunter's internal affairs were exceedingly intricate. Regaining his awareness and surveying his surroundings, he discovered Alice had vanished. He and the redhead immediately commenced a search. Their objective, locate the missing girl. Glancing back, he spotted her amidst the throng. However, the situation was more complex. Looming behind her was a massive figure, fixing her with an unsettling gaze. Clutching Alice's hand and addressing her as Little Miss, the unsavory man with a lecherous grin inquired if he could purchase her a beverage. The girl's eyes widened in astonishment. Observing her lack of response, the man tugged her hand closer. He questioned her hesitation. Impatiently, he urged her to accompany him, gesturing towards the bewildered girl's attire. He accused her of dressing provocatively to entice someone. Reaching his limit, the protagonist cursed and rose abruptly. He proceeded directly toward the young woman. Rage consumed him. The situation evoked a painful memory from his past. It was a recurrence he desperately wanted to avoid. However, contrary to expectations, the girl was not as vulnerable as she initially appeared. She was far from helpless. In an instant, her expression turned menacingly stern. A moment later, she seized the man's thick arm. With a forceful throw, she sent him crashing to the floor. She angrily demanded he leave her presence. The man landed with a loud thud. Blood trickled from his lips. Wang Lei's jaw slackened in astonishment. "That was incredible," he exclaimed. "Donna Drasalifan. You seem to have forgotten her formidable nature," she remarked. He chuckled. "I was concerned because of her petite stature," he responded. Their dialogue was abruptly halted by a resounding bang as someone slammed their hand on the table. The responsible party was a partially bald individual. A hulking figure occupied a table against the wall, encircled by his equally imposing companions. Rising abruptly from his seat, he confronted the girl, his voice laced with anger. He demanded to know how she dared lay a hand on a member of their crew, the Baldies. He then threatened her, suggesting she leave town immediately. Our hero, listening in, was perplexed. He questioned their self-proclaimed title, the Bald Gang, since they clearly possessed hair. Flexing their muscles and revealing partially bald heads, one of them retorted that he understood nothing. He declared that the extent of their baldness directly correlated to their strength. The man responded with a sneer, implying they were all pathetically weak. In a flash, they lunged at our protagonist, eager to teach him a harsh lesson. Simultaneously, an unusual rose-colored substance materialized in Li Fan's hand. Moments later, it solidified into the haft of a hammer. Grasping it firmly with both hands, the protagonist adopted a combat stance, then unleashed a swift, powerful swing. He unleashed the full force of the blow upon the largest of his adversaries. The man's eyes rolled back in agony, blood erupting from his nose. The sheer force of the impact sent him hurtling backward with the velocity of a projectile. He collided violently with his pursuing comrades, who were hot on his heels. With a single, decisive strike, the entire Baldy gang was vanquished. Alice exuberantly threw up more finger guns, her eyes sparkling with awe as she gazed at Li Fan. She addressed him as brother, praising his incredible strength. Li Fan gently corrected her, requesting she call him by his name. Wan Lai was both terrified and thrilled. Incredulously, she inquired how the protagonist could utilize his powers here. He countered with a simple question. Why not defend himself? The blonde man responded, warning that discovery of his ability within the club would spell disaster for them all. You're already a goner, a strange voice declared. The words snapped the men's attention, forcing them to look. Approaching them was a towering, imposing figure with a receding hairline. He radiated power, clearly surpassing the previous thugs. He held the 8th position in the C-rank hierarchy. His moniker was the Mediterranean despot, Li Baidon. He addressed Li Fan, inquiring whether he genuinely believed they were beyond control. Strolling toward Wang Lei, he condescendingly tapped his face. With a mocking tone, he questioned Wang Lei's courage to defy him. Now that he'd attained C-rank, our hero turned to the blonde man. He asked about the older man's identity. That's Li Weidong, the Mediterranean tyrant, he answered. He commands a Chrome Dome gang in the city. Upon hearing this, the protagonist was astonished by the sheer number of bald individuals in existence, considering they even possessed satellite locations. His contemplation, however, was abruptly halted by the group's ringleader. The leader approached, sneering and spitting out the insult bastard. He then balled his massive fist, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. Get on your knees, he snarled. Grovel for forgiveness before the entire bald gang, he commanded. Only then, on behalf of the club's proprietor, will I consider mercy. Unfazed by the intimidation, Li Fan met his gaze with icy composure. And what if I refuse? Li Fan inquired, his voice devoid of emotion. Upon hearing the protagonist's retort, a malevolent grin spread across his face. In a flash, he roared, "Damn you," and launched a furious punch. His blow, however, failed to connect. A frigid feminine voice cut through the air, halting his attack. "Stop," she commanded with authority. The source of the voice was a strikingly curvaceous woman. Clad in a form-fitting gown, she captivated the attention of every man present. It was impossible to tear their gazes away from her alluring presence. Her accompanying guards instantly created a path for her. Clutching a curule seat, she expressed her desire to confront those audacious enough to cause disruption on her domain. Upon observing her arrival, the large man offered an uneasy grin. He awkwardly acknowledged the woman as Boss Nia, remarking that it had been a considerable period since their last encounter. Gesturing towards the couple, he asserted that the petite individual initiated the conflict. His intervention, he claimed, was necessary Following his statement, she advanced slowly toward the protagonist, who regarded her with an apathetic expression. Closing in at extremely close proximity, she icily inquired if the large man's account was accurate. However, Wang Lai interjected, respectfully imploring the woman to remain calm and grant them pardon. He explained that his mentor was unfamiliar with the established protocols and harbored no intention of causing offense. After another inhale from her cigarette, she addressed him condescendingly and inquired, "Since when did he acquire an instructor?" He attempted a smile, responding that it was recent. In the next instant, the head of the shaved head crew approached the woman. He stated their group would offer twice the compensation. This was in exchange for a minor favor. Without turning, the woman inquired about the nature of this request. The man gestured towards Alice, who was attempting to consume a bowl overflowing with apples. He declared she was the catalyst for the entire incident. He desired to handle her personally. Upon hearing her name, the girl turned her head, seeking the source of the call. Li Fan's expression darkened after registering the large man's statement. He purposefully advanced towards Alice. One of them attempted to intervene, cautioning him against impulsiveness. He expressed confidence in his ability to mediate, but he was resolute. He grimly proceeded past Boss Nia and the gang's chief, who gazed at him with astonishment. As he drew near to Alice, Li Fan swiftly snatched the bowl she was attempting to devour. With irritation, he reminded her he'd explicitly forbidden her from consuming the food. The woman's face flushed with indignation at the man's audacious conduct. A surge of fury coursed through her. She was baffled by his apparent lack of unease in her presence. Turning towards him, she inquired if the protagonist had registered the proposition. He continued to compress Alice's cheeks, who persistently endeavored to retrieve her bowl. He responded that he had comprehended everything perfectly. Upon hearing this, she icily commanded him to deliver the girl to her immediately. "And if I refuse?" he countered coldly, fixing his gaze upon the woman. The gang leader, upon hearing his words, smirked. He questioned the source of his anger, adding that they harbored no immediate ill intentions towards them. However, his smile abruptly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer terror, as the protagonist's powerful grip seized his face, hoisting the large man into the air. Li Fan's voice, frigid and sharp, dared him to try. Their little amusement was abruptly halted by Boss Yang, who, whirling towards the protagonist, demanded, "How dare you commit such an act in my presence?" Exhaling a dense plume of smoke, completely obscuring her in a hazy cloud, she added in a chilling, somber tone, "Does my name hold no significance for you?" Observing Boss Nia's sudden shift in demeanor, Wan Lei frantically urged his teacher to apologize immediately. He warned, with evident fear, that failure to do so would result in dire consequences. Serious trouble awaited him. Upon hearing this, the protagonist questioned the woman's true influence. He eagerly confirmed her formidable power, emphasizing her rank of 108th among the B ranks. She was also infamously known as the Na Shin Cho smoker, no longer willing to endure such disrespect. The woman exhaled a dense plume of smoke. In a flash, a spear-like projectile materialized and hurtled forward. It launched directly toward Li Fan, who still grasped the hulking man. Observing the imminent threat, Wang Lei, filled with alarm, urged his master to evade. Yet, despite the looming peril, Li Fan remained motionless, gazing at the incoming spear. An instant later, the sound of tearing flesh echoed. A pained groan followed, belonging to none other than the gang's leader. Crimson erupted from his mouth as his grip, once firmly clenched around Li Fan, weakened and released, as the protagonist freed the large man, whose abdomen had been pierced by the woman's smoky assault. His inert form plummeted earthward, but the ordeal wasn't over. The cloud abruptly erupted from the man's corpse, morphing into a taloned appendage that lunged at the protagonist. Though the attack was unforeseen, he narrowly avoided it. No further strikes followed. However, the chamber started to fill with haze. The large man finally collapsed, seemingly at peace. Witnessing the woman's ruthlessness towards her comrade, Li Fan questioned her about her treacherous behavior toward her partner, emerging from a thick veil of smoke, which practically engulfed her. She retorted that there was no need for idle chatter. She then extended her hand, clutching a pipe. Out from the smog, she bellowed a command, summoning her smoky guardians. Immediately following her decree, a legion of warriors, adorned with helmets and brandishing swords, materialized from the mist. Heeding their mistress's command, they instantly charged towards the hero, He observed the approaching blade with his customary scowl. He effortlessly evaded the attack. With a slight sidestep, in a flash, he launched himself into the air, materializing directly overhead the bewildered defenders. They were left baffled, unable to comprehend his sudden translocation. Immediately after, Li Fan instructed the system to initiate the skill. Instantly, energy coalesced between his palms, which in the next heartbeat erupted as his hands clapped together. The energy transformed into a furious cyclone, obliterating the smoke-wielding assailants. While some cried out in panic, others seized this divine opportunity. It was a gift from the heavens themselves. As the smoke dissipated, the guards and boss Ne materialized behind them, shielding themselves with their arms against the fierce gale. Their gritted teeth betrayed their fury. Their displeasure at this defiance was palpable. Meanwhile, Alice continued to relish the complimentary meal, oblivious to her surroundings. Wanlei signaled his approval with a thumbs up, exclaiming with zeal that his mentor was truly exceptional. The woman, in contrast, refused to concede. Glaring at the protagonist, she declared that wind was indeed the most effective counter to her abilities. Yet, this was not her sole advantage. She enveloped one leg in a smoky shroud and advanced towards Li Fan. With a swift, smoke-empowered kick, she launched an assault. A smirk played on her lips as she added that beat. Rank encompassed more than just paranormal talents. Despite this, his expression remained unchanged. He calmly instructed, "System, activate the Iron Body technique." "Iron Body skill," he reiterated. Bosnia's eyes widened in a mixture of astonishment and dread as the implication dawned upon her. However, it was already too late. He snagged her leg with his hand, now transformed into solid iron. Li Fan boasted of his own prowess in unarmed combat, but his pitiful bragging ended abruptly. He flushed crimson and averted his gaze in the next instant. Still grasping her leg, he inadvertently glimpsed something forbidden. He stammered, flustered, inquiring if she intended to remain in that compromising position. Comprehending her error, she reddened and cursed him, calling him a scoundrel. She shrieked at him to retreat. She brandished her pipe, the smoke transforming it into a razor-sharp edge, targeted directly at the protagonist's throat. Wrenching free from his grasp, she launched herself into the air. With a furious countenance, she assailed him from above. In a flash, however, her rage intensified as he effortlessly parried her blade. He simply deflected it with his iron-clad hand. Recognizing her disadvantage in close-quarters combat, the woman retreated to a secure position. She conjured a smoky explosion. Yet, the protagonist deftly evaded it. He merely leaped into the air, but he wasn't going to perpetually retreat and defend. In the ensuing moment, he enveloped himself in a crimson aura. He extended his hand forward. He commanded the system to activate the binding ability. Consequently, in the following instant, to the girl's astonishment, she was immobilized, utterly incapacitated. The alarmed bodyguards instantly inquired about her well-being. They offered their assistance, but she vehemently ordered them to remain still. With diminished fury, she gazed at the protagonist and questioned his identity. She inquired about his ranking. He casually scratched his head. He responded that his name was Li Fan. He identified himself as a ranked hunter. Boss Nia ground her teeth, glaring at the man with seething frustration. She questioned whether he genuinely possessed the credentials of a ranked hunter. And if he did, how could the assessment system have so grossly misjudged his capabilities? The silence was shattered by a sudden sound. It emanated from the spot where the behemoth should have been incapacitated. Whirling around, astonishment washed over them as they witnessed him, not only alive but upright. Our protagonist, with a playful grin, inquired if he intended to continue the skirmish. But a split second later, Wanlei's urgent cry to evade reached his ears. However, Li Fan's gaze remained fixed on the colossal figure, who had inexplicably grown even larger, leaving him paralyzed, struggling to comprehend the transformation. In a flash, the ex-gang leader's enormous fist connected with the protagonist's abdomen. Frozen in place, bracing for impact, a sharp cry of agony erupted from him. The former head of the Ball gang no longer resembled a human being, but rather a frenzied, undead monstrosity. He roared in rage, flailing his arms wildly. Overcoming him seemed like a formidable task, even for our protagonist.